Hello, this is a podcast taking a deep dive into the document from The Compliance Doctor. Compliance Doctor is part of the top UK regulatory consultancy, Compliance Consultant. Call us on 0800 689 0190. Now on with the podcast.
Okay, so picture this. You wake up, grab your phone, and boom, another headline about shady dealings and shell corporations moving millions. It feels almost like a movie, right?
It does.
But here's the thing. The fight against financial crime is very real, and it's happening right now, even as we speak. Today, we're diving deep into the world of anti-money laundering efforts in the UK.
And it's not just about chasing down criminal masterminds, though that's definitely part of it. We're going behind the scenes, taking a hard look at the systems and organizations tasked with preventing these crimes in the first place.
Exactly. Think of it like this. We're getting a sneak peek into the rule book, but more importantly, we're figuring out if anyone's actually following it and if those rules are even any good. We're dissecting this report called the OPBAS Report Legal and Act 2023-24.
OPBAS, for those unfamiliar, stands for the Office for Professional Body Anti-Money Laundering Supervision. Quite a mouthful, right?
Definitely a mouthful. But trust me, this report is way more interesting than its name suggests. It's basically a health check for how the UK tackles money laundering.
Precisely. It examines those responsible for overseeing accountants, lawyers. Professions that, while essential, could be susceptible to misuse by individuals trying to game the system.
Because at the end of the day, money talks and criminals are always looking for clever ways to clean their dirty cash. And this report doesn't just scratch the surface, it dives right into the deep end, examining whether the UK is truly equipped to combat financial crime on a global scale.
And one of the things that this report really digs into is the concept of professional enablers. Now, this doesn't always mean someone in a fancy suit actively helping criminals launder money.
Right. It's more like sometimes, even without realizing it, someone could be inadvertently playing a role in these schemes. It's a bit unnerving when you think about it, right?
Absolutely. And the report points out that there's a real risk of professionals, even those with the best intentions, becoming unwitting participants. For example, a lawyer who doesn't thoroughly vet a client's source of funds, or an accountant who misses red flags in a complex transaction. Seemingly small oversights that can have significant consequences.
And it turns out, according to the report, that even those tasked with overseeing these professions, the professional body supervisors, they're not always doing the best job of assessing those risks.
That's right. The report highlights trust in company service providers, or TCSPs, as a prime example. These TCSPs often deal with things like setting up companies and managing assets, making them a potential hotspot for money laundering.
And here's where it gets interesting. The report actually calls out one supervisor who completely ignored the risks associated with TCSPs, even though those risks are clearly laid out in the UK's National Risk Assessment. It's like they skipped right over that chapter, which is a big no-no in this line of work.
It really underscores the importance of a risk-based approach, which is essentially about understanding the specific areas where money laundering is most likely to occur, and then focusing your resources and attention on those areas.
So it's not just about checking boxes and saying, yep, we're compliant. It's about really understanding the ins and outs of where the risks are and how to effectively shut them down. And that's where, according to the report, things get a little murky.
Exactly. The report found a concerning lack of consistency in how supervisors are doing their jobs. Some are heavily reliant on what they call desk-based reviews, which is essentially just reviewing documents, while others prefer on-site visits. But even then, there's no standardized definition of what those terms actually mean in practice.
So it's like everyone's playing the same game but with different rule books, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it?
Not quite. And this lack of consistency creates potential loopholes that criminals can exploit. If the approach to supervision isn't standardized and rigorous across the board, it weakens the entire system.
And here's where it gets really interesting and a little worrying. The report shows that despite more instances of organizations not following the rules, the number of fines and penalties has actually gone down. What's that about? Does that seem like a recipe for success to you?
That's a very important point to highlight. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? And it raises the question, is this a matter of resources, of priorities, or something else entirely?
Right, because if you're someone looking to make a quick buck illegally, and you see that the chances of getting caught are slim, and even if you are caught, the penalties aren't that severe, well, it sends a pretty clear message, doesn't it?
It does. Effective deterrence relies on swift and proportionate enforcement.
Okay, so we've talked about how this report highlights some potential weaknesses in the UK system. But there's another layer to this, right? They talk about these platforms for sharing information like FVNetNet and the Shared Intelligence Service, or SIS.
And this is where information sharing becomes crucial. These platforms are designed to help different agencies, supervisors, law enforcement, even international bodies share critical information about potential threats. For example, FINNet, which stands for the Financial Crime Information Network, allows for the exchange of information related to financial crime investigations.
So it's like a virtual war room where everyone's sharing intel on potential bad guys, except in the financial world.
Precisely. And SIS, or the Shared Intelligence Service, serves as a central hub for sharing intelligence across various UK agencies. But here's the catch. The report found that these platforms, while promising in theory, aren't being used to their full potential, particularly when it comes to supervisors sharing what they know.
Wait, so they have these tools that could be absolute game changers in the fight against financial crime, but they're not using them. Why on earth not?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The report suggests a certain reluctance, particularly among supervisors, to share information in real time, specifically about ongoing investigations.
You'd think they'd want to shout that information from the rooftops. What's the holdup?
Well, it's complex. There may be concerns about jeopardizing investigations, data privacy issues, or even just a lack of awareness about the full capabilities of these platforms. However, the report does offer some compelling examples of just how effective these platforms can be when used correctly. They highlight a case where an accounting supervisor used MNet to uncover crucial details about a client's overseas dealings leading to, let's just say it led to some serious consequences for that client.
Okay, so Mnet helped them catch the bad guy. That makes sense. But they also mention another case where it actually helped someone, right?
Exactly. In another instance, FinNet helped clear a professional's name. A supervisor was concerned about a member potentially breaching sanctions, but using FinNet, they were able to quickly confirm that everything was above board.
So it's not just about catching the bad guys. It's about making sure the system is fair and accurate. It seems like better communication could prevent a whole lot of headaches for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of the report, the supervisors themselves. We've talked about inconsistencies in how they operate, but the report reveals some surprising variations in their very structure and organization.
Speaking of things that raise eyebrows, let's talk about the who behind all this. Remember those professional body supervisors, the ones making sure everyone's playing by the rules? Well, it turns out they're not all created equal.
It's true. Some are set up as charities, others as limited companies. And this can have a ripple effect on everything, from their resources and priorities to how they even use the money they get from those AML fines.
Hold on, are you telling me that some of these groups responsible for policing financial crime are charities? How does that even work?
It might sound unusual, but it's true. And while their charitable status doesn't necessarily dictate their effectiveness, it does raise questions about transparency and accountability.
You think some of them might be playing a little fast and loose with the rules?
Well, the report found a real mixed bag when it comes to transparency, particularly around finances. Some supervisors openly publish their audited financial statements for anyone to see, while others are much more tight-lipped. And when it comes to those AML fines, some earmark that money specifically for bolstering their anti-money laundering efforts, while others, well, let's just say the trail gets a little cold.
So it's like some of these groups are publishing their financial statements online for anyone to see, while others are keeping their cards close to their chest. That doesn't seem very consistent, does it?
It does highlight a need for greater uniformity and transparency across the board.
Hmm.
And if that wasn't interesting enough, get this, some supervisors are actually outsourcing their AML work to external contractors.
Wait, hold on. Are you telling me that some of these organizations are actually hiring other companies to do their AML work for them? That seems a bit like a school hiring a catering company to make lunches, and then just hoping for the best without checking if the food is any good.
That's a great analogy. And you're right to point out that outsourcing in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, the report did uncover instances where those contracted companies weren't as up-to-date as they should be on the supervisor's specific policies and procedures, even things like risk assessments.
So you've got these groups tasked with ensuring that professionals are taking AML seriously, but they're not always following those practices themselves. Talk about irony.
It does underscore a need for greater accountability at every level. If these supervisors are going to be effective in combating financial crime, they need to be held to a high standard themselves, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It can't be a case of do as I say, not as I do. But how do we even know who's overseeing whom? Is there some kind of master list?
That's another point. The report raises the idea of a central register for all AML-supervised entities. Currently, there's no single, easily accessible database that tells you who's responsible for supervising whom. Imagine if you're a business owner and want to verify if your accountant is properly supervised. You'd have to go on a digital scavenger hunt through various websites, hoping to strike gold.
That sounds incredibly inefficient.
It is, and it underscores a lack of transparency that can be easily remedied. The report suggests that a central register would be incredibly beneficial, though they do acknowledge challenges such as maintaining data accuracy and, of course, funding.
But imagine how much simpler and more transparent it would be for everyone, businesses, individuals, even the supervisors themselves, if there was one central hub for all this information.
It could be a game changer for sure. But as with most things, there are always two sides to the coin. While a central register might sound like a no-brainer, there are valid concerns about data privacy and the potential for misuse of that information.
It's a classic dilemma, isn't it? Weighing the benefits of increased transparency against potential risks. It definitely highlights the complexity of navigating this landscape. But regardless of how that debate shakes out, there's one thing we can all agree on. The fight against financial crime isn't just for governments and big agencies. It's something we all have a stake in.
You hit the nail on the head.
Mm-hmm.
And this report drives that point home, emphasizing that each and every one of us has a role to play.
Because, like we said before, any one of us could become an enabler without even realizing it. It's a sobering thought, right?
It is, and that's why awareness is so crucial. Understanding the risks, asking the right questions, and reporting anything suspicious, these are all simple yet powerful actions we can take regardless of our profession. It's about being vigilant and informed.
It's like if you see something, say something, but in the financial world, don't just turn a blind eye if something feels off. Speak up.
Exactly. Now that brings us to a really thought-provoking question this report raises. Would a central register of those AML-supervised entities actually make a difference? Would it actually move the needle in the fight against financial crime?
It's a question worth pondering. On the one hand, easier access to information could be a game changer. Imagine being able to quickly and easily check if, say, a financial advisor is properly supervised. Wouldn't that boost confidence and trust?
Undoubtedly. It would also make it much harder for criminals to exploit those gaps in oversight we were talking about earlier. But of course, on the flip side, you've got those valid concerns about data privacy and the potential for misuse. It's a balancing act for sure.
It always is, isn't it? Finding that sweet spot between security and individual rights. But hey, at least this report gets the conversation started, right? It pushes us to think critically about the systems in place and how they could be improved.
Precisely. And ultimately, building a truly effective AML system requires a collective effort. It's bigger than any one person, agency, or report. It's about supervisors, law enforcement, businesses, and individuals all working together to safeguard the integrity of the financial system.
So if you're listening to this thinking, okay, that was fascinating, but where do I even go from here? What can I actually do? What would you suggest?
Start by looking closer to home. Are there resources within your own field or industry that can help you better understand AML risks and best practices? Many professional organizations offer their members valuable guidance and training on these very topics.
It's about empowering yourself with knowledge, because as we've seen today, knowledge really is power. The more we understand about the mechanics of financial crime, the better equipped we are to prevent it.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe those conversations sparked by a report like this will lead to even more innovative solutions down the line.
I love that, turning knowledge into action. Well, that just about wraps up our deep dive into the world of AML here in the UK. We've journeyed through regulations, peeked behind the curtain at supervisors, and even grappled with those all-important and often unwitting enablers.
It's been a dense but illuminating exploration, wouldn't you say? And while we've covered a lot of ground, remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The world of financial crime is constantly evolving, presenting new challenges and opportunities for learning.
Exactly. So keep those questions coming, stay curious, and join us next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters.
Until then, stay informed and stay vigilant.